Hi, and welcome to my shop. Today we're going to build this really awesome mid-century modern style stepping stool. For this project, I have a lovely piece of 4/4 or 1-inch walnut stock. First step is to square up one side on the jointer. Then it's over to the miter saw to cut this length up into smaller pieces for the various parts that will be needed for the project. I'm going to start with gluing up 2 boards to make the top surface. To do this, obviously, it's pretty standard, glue up technique. I like to put a bit of tape on my clamps. I made that mistake a couple of times. It's quite a nuisance to clean them up, so just a little tip there. This is a good time to clean off any excess glue, and then we'll leave it to set up overnight. In the morning, we'll be able to then put it through the drum sander to clean up both sides. I like to put a little bit of a twist in it there just to kind of cut the grain across as well, helps me get it nice and smooth and flat. As you can see, TJ is doing quality control there, so we better run it through the jointer to get this tabletop flat before the next step. Moving to the table saw, it's time to cut the top of the step stool to the final size. And I must say that I do so love how easy it is to set up the Incra fence system for repeatable, exact measurement cuts. I don't know why I keep double checking my tape, but it's good. Now for a quick look at my SketchUp 3D model of the project to check the dimensions for the next pieces to be cut. For the legs, I'm going to make a MDF template that I can use for routing the shapes on the legs. Now, I could have used my X-Carve to make this template. Since I have a 3D model, that would have been not so hard. But I figured, just for practice, I'll make it the manual way as well. So here you see me just marking it up. And by the way, having a 3D printer is handy. I needed to quickly print a template there for circle sizes, a couple of different templates actually. That's when having a 3D printer in the shop comes in really handy. So once I've done that, I've marked it up on my MDF and off to the bandsaw to cut the rough shape out. Then over to the oscillating sander to finish up the lines. I couldn't get a tight enough circle with the belt attachment, so I added a spindle stick and finished that up. Now to finish milling the lumber for the legs and the crossbars, first step is really just to square up one edge, and I mark them as I go to know which edge is really clean and good to go. Then using that clean edge as a reference, I can cut the pieces to the finished size. A quick adjustment to the Incra fence, and I'm ready to cut the pieces that will make up the legs and the crossbars down to final size also. So now that I have all the pieces to size, the logical next step is to move over to the bandsaw and using my template to mark the pieces, just cut them out to a rough size, and then I'll be using the template to route them to the actual shape. After watching this a few times, I decided to accelerate a little, and here we go for the last piece. Yep, you guessed it. We've moved over to the router table, and I have put a edge trimming bit into the router, set it to the correct height for my template, and it's so captivating just watching the sawdust being sucked into the dust collector there, or not. It's kind of interesting how this stuff clogs up, and then I guess I'm just playing for time while I'm finishing this part of the exercise. I think I'll have to accelerate this as well. There we go. Last piece. So for a change of scenery, I'm flipping over to working on the top again. I've put a 45-degree bit into the router table, and I'm cutting the chamfer on the underside first. Then I change the bit to a small roundover for the top side of the table. It's about this point where you suddenly realize, oh my gosh, I've missed an important step in the leg preparation. I should have put the 45-degree chamfer cut onto the legs before I cut the shape out on the bandsaw on the router. Yeah, at the end of the day, I guess I'm just getting to use every single tool in my shop to do this simple table. So here we go. So the problem is how to hold down these odd-shaped pieces and safely cut a 45-degree angle on one side. The answer is to build a simple little jig that we can use micro jig dovetail clamps on to hold the piece as it goes through the table saw in a safe way. Back to the table saw, I used the digital angle gauge to set up for perfect miter joints on the leg corners. It's the only way. Now to put the 45-degree angle onto the sleds that I made. I say sleds because I made two, just in case I mess up one of them. I scribed the 45-degree cut line on both ends of the workpiece so that I could align it then on the sled. And the first cut came out just perfect. Same process then for all 8 leg halves and on to the next. For the final piece of table saw work, it's cutting the leg spars that connect the legs to the final size. One final check of the design, and it's time for dry fitting to make sure that everything came out as planned. And pleased to report, he did. Oh, and the inspector's back, and TJ approves also. So as we move on to assembly steps, I'm starting with the legs and the spars that connect them. I'm using my Festool domino joiner here. I understand not everybody has one, so this can be accomplished with dowels or mortise and tenons or probably a couple of other methods of joinery. I just find this is the quickest and most reliable way that I can do it since I have the tool for it. Until I got to the smaller pieces, which I realized I couldn't quite hold effectively on the clamping method I was using here, so had to get a little creative and ended up using the bench vise. So yeah, keep in mind there's more than one way to do everything, so these are the ways I found to get this job done pretty easily. The next challenge was to clamp on the sharp edges of those miters. So back to SketchUp to make a clamping jig that I could quickly 3D print in the shop, and that worked well. It's finally time to move on to start gluing up the various parts. I typically use Titebond 2 glue, by the way. Of course, you can use other brands as well. I find this dispenser is super useful on the bench for keeping simple, clean pours. Having done the prep work of making those clamping jigs, this stage actually gets pretty simple, and it's a matter of rinse and repeat and putting all the pieces together. They come together really nicely with the dominoes. Let's see if we can accelerate this process a little. Oh, by the way, I will also add into the comments below links to a lot of the parts and tools that I use throughout the project. Watching the repeatability here, I start wondering how long it's going to take for a robot to be able to replace me. Seriously though, this is my flow zone. When I'm doing stuff like this, time just flies. I'm just having fun. Once the glue dries, we're back to the sander to just get everything ready for final assembly. That's an important point though, to remember along the way to do as much sanding as you can while stuff is in a sub-assembled state. Once you put it together, it just ends up being so much more effort, and it's really awkward to get into some of the corners and so on. using my drum sander here to flatten everything again. Back to the router table now to put a 1/4 inch round over on the inside edges. I know mid-century modern is very interpretive. My take on it is straight edges on the outside and rounded on the inside, and a lot of tapered legs and shapes to give it some character. I'm also reminded that a project that actually seems pretty simple on the outside takes a whole lot of steps and time to construct. So I guess I'm hoping in making these videos that I'm helping makers to understand how to do it, but I'm also helping potential buyers to understand and appreciate the amount of effort that goes into these custom products. That's it. I'll get back off my soapbox and on with the project. So now we're at the stage where we can glue the legs together into the base structure. My 45-degree miters are nice and tight, so a thin coat of glue, and I'm using also a strap clamp, which you typically would use for picture frames or boxes to pull it all together. That is a super easy way to clamp it up. And additionally, then, of course, just to make sure that all of the pieces are nice and tight together, I'll use some hand clamps to just squeeze up the legs nice and tight and then leave it to dry for the next stage. Apparently, I'm happy with how that came out. So I am going to be back at the router table to put a little rabbet on the top of the base, just underneath the actual tabletop, if you will. This just gives it that illusion of that the top is actually floating above the legs. I love that in that effect. So here we go. We'll see how this looks. There's a couple of static images just to give you a sense of what I mean. The next challenge was how to attach the top to the leg structure. And I decided to go with using figure-of-8 clips that you would typically use on a table. Although, the holes are encroaching a little bit into my rabbet area, you absolutely can't see them given the depth of that rabbet and underneath the top of the table. It'll look very cool. Now it's time to apply finish. I'm using this Natura One Coat with a walnut pigment. It is a 2-part product, so measure carefully and mix thoroughly to ensure a good outcome. Now, I typically use a clear finish, but I found that with UV bleaching, it tends to lighten up a lot and go somewhat yellow on walnut. So some folks prefer to put a black stain on first and then apply the clear. I'm trying this 1-part product that already has the color in, and let's see how this comes out. As we're getting near the end here, I just wanted to thank everybody for stopping by to watch the video. If you like my work and interested in seeing more, please feel free to subscribe and hit the little bell if you want to get notified when I release new content. I have a number of pieces in the works, and I really love sharing my passion for woodworking. So appreciate anybody who's stopping by, and I'll leave it at that. No jokes though, I do wish I could work this fast. Although, I guess I'd be missing all the fun of just going through the process. And yes, I really do love this finish. Okay, now for the final act. Let's put it all together and see how it came out. I would also love to hear any feedback or thoughts that you have, so feel free to leave any comments. And I look forward to seeing you again in the future. Enjoy. Thanks again for watching, and remember that any day in the shop is better than a day in the office.